I'm Victoria Pearson, but you can call me V, and this week on my vlog I'm doing something just a little bit different. You might have to bear with me because I'm doing technical stuff that I don't really understand. You see, I am friends with an author called Miranda, who has been a friend on Twitter for absolutely years. She's worked with me on editing my books, I've worked on her giving feedback on her books, and I really enjoy her work. She is branching out into a totally different side of writing now. She usually writes thrillers, horrors, things like that, but now she is branching into self-help sort of work. I have read her latest book, it's fantastic. I thought I would have to share it with you guys. And so when I asked her if I could talk about it, she agreed very kindly to come and talk about it with me. However, Miranda lives in a different country to me. I live in England, she lives in the Netherlands, and she is unlikely to be able to just pop over at any time soon, and so we are going to attempt to do a little interview over Zoom. I don't know how brilliant it's going to look, but we're going to do our best. We're feeling our way through it, and I'm going to connect and join up with Miranda just now. So I am here with the lovely Miranda K, who is mostly well known for your thriller, horror and fantasy stories.
Yeah.
I do have a few of those here, actually. But if we were going to go through all of your books, we would be here for hours. So we've got your Tricky Tales, which is Dead Lake and Unsailable Sea. We've got your psychological thriller there, Sleep.
That's probably my favourite.
Is that your favourite one? Yeah. I really enjoyed that one too. And I also have spoken about Slipping Through recently on the channel because one of my stories was in there as well. So
quite a few of your stories, but yeah.
Now, you have a Linktree link, don't you? So what I will do is I will put that in the description of this video, and then everyone can go and see all of your different books and your author website. But you've also got the self-help website as well, haven't you?
You've also got a Linktree for self-help.
Oh, well, I'll put that one in as well. Because that's mainly what we're talking about today, is that you have gone from writing your fantasy fiction, your psychological thriller fiction, your horror fiction, and now you have just released a self-help book.
Self-help.
Have you got a copy of that there? Because I do not.
I do.
The reason that I don't is because I thought it was good enough that I've already lent it out to somebody. So sorry about that.
No, lending it out is always a good thing.
So what made you sort of branch out into self-help?
Well, because of my coming from an abusive childhood and a very difficult childhood, I've spent a lot of my life in therapy from around the age of 20 onwards. That's when I first went into therapy for panic attacks. And I'm an avid reader of all self-help, mostly to deal with my own problems and to find ways to change that, particularly change how I think, change how I look at life, to help me cope, basically. But for me, the biggest difficulty has been negative self-talk in my head. So because I suffered a lot of verbal abuse from my single parent, my mother. For my entire teens, I was on my own with my mother from the age of 11. So I always called myself the emotional battering ram. I basically received everything. And so that's been the hardest thing to deal with, really. So the move into that really, I think a part of me always wanted to do a self-help book. And maybe because she's no longer with us, that she died in 2021, that I sort of have finally dared to actually put it out into the world. So that might be why. And also people on social media, particularly some of my friends in my circle of friends on social media, there's a lot of people that struggle with voices in the head, with negative dialogue, and there's all different terms for it. So that was really what made me lead into this book.
Yeah, I'm suppose that your mum passing was probably sort of an inciting incident for you to say, now I can finally,
Yeah. My mother, bless her, even though she was not a healthy person at all for me to be around, she was quite toxic, and I kept her at arm's length. In terms of my writing, in terms of anything creative, she was extremely supportive. She bought my books, even though she never read fiction, and actually would make offhand comments about how she didn't understand how anybody read that sort of rubbish. But yet, on the flip side, she bought those books. Solely because it was her daughter, and she could say to people, look what my daughter did, which was very much mostly how it was about. But it was her way, her only way probably, of trying to show her support. Yeah. So bringing out a self-help book I'd have to have done it secretly on the web, so to speak, because my mother was active on the web, active on Facebook, relatively speaking. She had a smartphone. She had far too much time on her hands, so she would have found it. Although I did manage to keep my website probably secret, I hope. I've also bear in mind that I've got 2 siblings, that I have a brother and sister, and all 3 of us experienced her differently. Trying to be sensitive to them too. That's also what I have to, so I bear that in mind. But I am also somebody who's a little bit scared to put too much out there. A lot of people find me too much already. So I sort of, I suppose I've learned to temper that over the years. I'm also very careful because how it's going to be received matters to me, and how people respond to that. I'm not and none of us are particularly good with criticism, and irrespective of whether it's constructive or not. And particularly as a writer, I always think that we're quite sensitive creatures anyway. So
our work is our babies.
And I've been scared to death, basically. That's probably why the delay, but also that it's really been for me the last 10 years that I've grown, because I had a breakdown in 2008. So I sort of rebuilt. And now I feel that I can be in a place I call it the wall. I'm on the other side of that wall. And so now I can put it in terms to help other people. I couldn't have done this 10 years ago.
The things that you talk about in your book, are those the sorts of things that helped you to get over that wall then?
Yes, because my breakdown very much was paranoid thinking, coming away from any social situation with thinking that person thought this about me, or, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. And this constant noise in my head, and it got very, very loud, very, very negative.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. So those sort of the methods that I suppose in some respects as well, there's a lot of methods that I hadn't even really thought about that I used until I sat down to write about, all the different ones, and also the common ones, like people tell you to meditate, or people tell you to journal, or people tell you to, to go walking or to do exercise, which are helpful, but they're not always in the moment helpful. They're not in that moment when you suddenly realize that you're saying horrible things to yourself and you want to stop doing that and you don't really know how.
I found mindfulness quite difficult in that kind of situation, actually, because if I am in a negative thought spiral, sitting in that isn't always the best for me. And that's one of the things that I really liked about your book, actually, is that it gives you those sort of practical tips to stop that in the moment. Would you say that's how your book sort of differs from other self-helping books? Because I've seen that a few people have described, myself included, have described Kill the Goblins as self-help for people that don't like self-help without all the woo. Yeah. How is it different to other stuff?
Very conscious of that. As somebody who reads excessive amounts of self-help and who does dabble in the woo quite a bit, in the esoterical that edges into the spiritual. There's a lot of people out there. And that's the difficulty is there's an awful lot of people out there trying to make money in this business, literally just out there to make the money, to become coaches and to become this and to become that and sell. And some of them have great messages, and they do. But the longer they go on for, you start to see the holes in it. And that's mostly because they don't necessarily come from a background where they have had to recover from extreme trauma. Self-help has become, a bad word, a negative thing now. People are like, roll their eyes because they think of memes. They think of, as I say, the esoteric jargon that goes with it. And everybody now hates the word affirmation. You're not allowed to use that word either. And they've all become these sort of dirty words. So I've specifically made sure I don't touch on that in this book. I don't use those terms. A lot of terminology that they use, which are big, complicated words. And I used to think, they use these big words and people don't know what they mean. They don't know how to relate that into what's happening for them in that moment. And that's the key thing. So I didn't want to use any of those terms. I wanted it to be simple and accessible to everyday people, because those are the people suffering every day. Their negative thinking not only affects their own lives, it affects the lives of their families, their children, the people around them, because that's also what I observed with my mother. Because of her own inability to, she also had the negative voices. She was not remotely conscious of them, but they really, how she behaved, how she reacted, affected us, her children, directly. Our behaviour affects us. There's a lot of people who are raising children who aren't aware that their behaviour has a massive impact on their child. There are people who think about, I probably need help, but I can't afford it, I can't this, I can't that. So I'm trying to put it in the simplest terms into a book that's accessible to people.
that who your book is mostly aimed at? Is the sort of people who think self-help isn't really speaking to me specifically? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's difficult because when you publish this sort of book, you have to make it accessible, not just to them, but also to the other crowd, because at the same time, people want it recommended from somebody that they know within that industry.
Yeah.
So you sort of get a whole sort of twist on it. I mean, I've used the term kill the goblins. I call them the goblins. Again, based within actually an esoteric thing, which is me dabbling in oracle cards. And one of them, Colette Baron-Reid, is the name of one of her cards, number 5 in one of her decks. And it described exactly the voices of self-doubt in our head. And she called them goblins, that they come in to cause destruction, bent on destruction in your head. To me, that's a perfect description.
I really like that idea of sort of personifying those negative thoughts and those thought spirals as, the little goblin that you can just go and it does sort of make it a bit easier to manage. I really, really like that. You touched a little bit on trauma that you had growing up, things like that. Are there any sort of personal anecdotes or stories from your life that you would feel comfortable sharing that sort of connect to the themes in your book?
There's an awful lot. Anecdotes for me, within an actual abusive situation, my mother literally used to come into my room and start screaming at me, literally ranting at me about how it wasn't my life, that I was not important, and what did I have to be upset about, and it was not, and ranting, and how you did this and you did that, and your fault this, your fault. Literally in that tone, in that voice, like screaming high pitch. She used to literally come into my room and do that, particularly through my 16 and 17 years, reminding me that I was a problem for her, that I was a burden to her, and that I wasn't important or nothing. And certainly my feelings, I didn't have a right to have feelings. I think.
And so does that then become the internal narrative for you as an adult, is that it's all those things that were said to you in those formative years?
Yeah, and sometimes you're not, most of the time you're not conscious. Certainly becoming a parent for me was the hardest thing, because you start to hear that your parent coming through yourself, and that was a real struggle. But also that I was unconsciously treating my children as burdens, both in the dialogue I was using in my head about them, as well as what I was verbally saying to them. I realised that I had not only a negative view of myself as a parent, that I was carrying on this view of my children as being difficult, and that not only did I think that in my head, that I was treating them like that, even though to me, I love my children, I adore my children, I think they're great, but I wasn't vocalising that enough to them or to myself. And so I absolutely needed to change the dialogue.
It's really brilliant that you were able to sort of see what was happening there, think this is what needs to change, this is the steps that I need to take to change that, and I'm working on it now. Because I think there are a lot of people out there who are wounded children who are trying to raise children, and that's really hard.
It is. It's really, really hard. In my late teens, I could hear her screaming at me, and I could hear her saying things that were really about her and weren't really about me. And I was conscious of that, didn't stop the influence of the things that she said and did.
That's the thing. We can logically know that these things aren't rational, but it doesn't change how it makes us feel. Yeah.
And she was also neglectful through my early years. So I wasn't listened to. Nobody paid attention to me. All of the key things that nurture a person to be able to build normal self-esteem, to build normal ability to care about themselves and love themselves. It also then develops as you become as an adult. If you're not listened to well as a child, you also are not a good listener, and you talk over people, or you talk too much, or you trauma dump. You just say, oh yeah, but this happened to me. And it can be something really, to somebody else, really horrific, but to you, it became the norm. And as I was raised in domestic violence, it was my norm. And people found it shocking, and then they move away from you, and then you think, well, what did I do? And then you just assume people don't like you and that you're not likable, because that was part of the dialogue that your parent used with you.
And sometimes that's the first clue for somebody that they maybe didn't have an idyllic childhood, is when they relate a funny story and everyone is horrified. And so if you are recognizing yourself in what you're saying, if somebody watching this is recognizing themselves, they're recognizing that they have this internal dialogue that doesn't really match reality, but is making them feel better.
Doesn't support them. It leaves them feeling bad about themselves.
Yeah.
Because that's the first key. A lot of people sort of may think, well, how would I know if I'm not talking nicely to myself? Because you end up feeling bad about yourself, that you end up thinking, well, why would anybody want to be a friend to me? Or, yeah, but I'm this and I'm that. And they're all negative words.
And if it was anybody else that you love, you would never speak to them in the way that you speak to yourself.
No, exactly.
In Kill the Goblins, do you have a sort of practical techniques for people to just stop doing that? Like, can you give me an example of that, or is that giving away the cow?
Well, I've got about 17 strategies in there. They sort of topped up to at the end. My key, which is the one I start with, is saying stop in your head. Literally, as soon as you realise that you're in this dialogue, or I used to do scenarios where I was arguing with people. You know, I do these imagined scenarios. Oh, they're going to say this, and this is what I'd say back. And they're little imagined scenarios, like a little film in my head. And I'd end up feeling bad, you know, as an imagined response as well. But then I'd say, stop. This is not helpful to you. This is not helping you in the moment. This conversation's never going to happen. Why are you doing this? And often, I mean, it takes a long time before you can take that next stage, which is, why am I doing that? What is it that's setting me? What am I feeling today that scenario is happening? For me, it will be insecurity about something, feeling disconnected from something, feeling very lonely. It's a very common one for me. Those things, I'll suddenly think, oh, you know, I'll say this to them. And so then I'll have a dialogue where, you know, I reveal something to them, but it doesn't make me feel good. It actually feeds the negativity. There's this common misconception that only people that are mad talk to themselves. That's rubbish. Everybody talks to themselves. I am somebody that talks out loud.
In the dentist, and as you know, I have a bit of a phobia of the dentist. I'm working on it, and I was in there and I was starting to feel a bit panicky, and I said to her, I need a minute. And I looked in this mirror above her sink so that I could see myself, and I went, behave yourself. You are in control of this situation and it is fine. And she just sort of laughed at me, and I sat back down and she went, are you okay now? And that's all I needed, was to tell myself off. I'm fine now.
I also am able to also think past that situation. As somebody who had cervical cancer in her early teens, 18, I was 17, I was diagnosed with it, and having to have treatment then, I used to, and having to go through, you know, the indignity that women go through for those sort of things. And rather than think about what would actually happen in that room, I would think about what I'd be doing after I was in that room. So I wasn't thinking about that moment. I was thinking about the moment after, and that I was going to be all right, and it was going to be fine. I mean, of course, I remember waking up the night before I had the major treatment, which was a laser treatment on my cervix. I woke up the night before feeling sick and I'm
not surprised.
And I literally just kept the mantra of, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And that's what put me back, back to sleep. And people knock the whole affirmation thing, but that is an affirmation. I mean, there's also this new one of realizing am I going to be okay? I am already okay. That's one that people
we kind of knock affirmations of like, oh, you're speaking nicely to yourself. That's weird. But it's totally normal to speak really, really badly to yourself all of the time. And surely that is worse. Surely that is worse.
To me, that's perpetrated by organisations. When you've got an organisation that's perpetuating this idea that you are always bad and you are always sinning, you are already starting from a place where you think you are worthless.
Yeah.
And that is actually wrong. We are actually born perfect. We are all born with absolutely open to everything, ready to love, to be perfectly honest. And it is how we are treated and how society is that changes that.
I think that what you just touched on there was really beautiful. We're born ready to love, and it's how we're treated that affects us. And I think that something that I think your book touches on quite a lot, it's sort of a running theme throughout, is that we get to choose the narrative we tell ourselves about ourselves, and that story that we're telling ourselves will affect how we behave, it will affect how we feel, it will affect our families, all sorts of things like that. And so it's quite sort of wide-ranging.
Henry Ford, the creator of Ford, he said, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Because what you believe about yourself, about anything in your life, is how it's going to go. It depends if there's external factors.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, we all have the different external factors and we all have challenges, and some of those are much greater challenges than other people's. But I think as soon as you tell yourself that it's insurmountable, that's when it becomes so. You need the belief and the knowledge that you can get through it to be able to get through it, whatever it is.
The biggest thing that I have found is being consistent and persistent in my life, and also setting up routines and structures are key to you achieving all the things that I limit, the things that I do. We all limit what we do by what we think, by what we believe, all those things. But with any of these approaches, it's step by step. You have to take it at your own pace. You have to meet yourself where you are. And it's that, and that's what I talk about in the second part of the book, is how to go about that.
You say that Kill the Goblins is not going to fix you, it's going to give you the techniques to help you start fixing yourself.
There's only one person that can fix you, and that's you. There's absolutely nobody else that can fix you. Lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. If you want to get fixed, you can get fixed. If you don't want to get fixed, you won't get fixed. You know, it's that kind of thing. I am providing tools, simple as that. The person that can change the way you feel is yourself. So for me, it's tools, and it's the first step, read it from cover to cover, or you can just pick it up and take bits out.
Does your book work quite well if you do that, or do you need to read cover to cover?
All the strategies have a chapter heading, as does the second part as well. And if that chapter heading speaks to you and you think, oh, I'm going to have a look at that and see what that says, then it's there. The biggest thing I've also tried to do is I don't want to tell anybody how they need to be or how they should be. Everybody needs to find their own way to do that. There's an awful lot of self-help out there where people push their ideas and push their own beliefs, saying you have to think this because if you don't, there's something wrong, or if you don't believe this, it's not right, or this is how you have to believe something. And even in the esoteric world, I don't agree with that. I think everybody has their own perceptions of how things are and how they, and what they believe. And I think it's perfectly possible to put your ideas across without telling somebody this is how you have to think and this is how you believe.
Because all of our brains work differently, and it all depends on what experiences we've had of what kind of techniques are going to chime with us. I think that is what I like about Kill the Goblins, actually, is that it is very sort of practical level. So you don't have to have a belief in a particular god, a particular morality system. You don't have to have had a particular experience for it to make sense to you. I really, really liked that about it.
Whoever you are, hopefully this book could still talk to you, no matter what you think and believe.
Any success stories so far? Has anybody sort of got back to you that they've helped? I know it's quite early.
My key people who have enjoyed this book, there's been one person called Debbie Hampton. She has a website called The Best Brain Possible, and she read it and she said to me, that she really likes it, really, really addresses sort of tools of the mind, because she calls it neuroplasty. Neuroplasty is another term for basically changing how you think.
Yeah.
And so that was really big for me that she found it, helpful. And there's a review from somebody I don't know who is a therapist who said it really provides the tools for her to help her clients, which I think that to me, that was fantastic to hear.
Yeah. So future plans, are you planning on steering more into the self-help genre? Are you staying with fiction, doing a bit of both still?
I've got
so busy.
I am that mem with that stream of noise that comes flying out. And I feel there's a bottleneck in there where it's all trying to squish through. This will be probably part of a series. Kill the Goblins will be part of a series. The next one will be about anger. It'll be Kill the Rage, how to stop feeling angry about absolutely everything, because I've had a lot of people around me who are really struggling with sort of these real mixed feelings that are anger. And I'm also going to do an anxiety one, because that's one of the biggest topics. And a lot of people suffer anxiety, and there are lots of different forms of anxiety.
Anger and anxiety are both quite physical emotions, aren't they? You get the thudding heart and the uneven breathing and the belly problems, and
all of them relate. I mean, even what goes on in your head will affect how angry you get about things, and will also affect your residual anger. So there's a huge crossover. Depression is often anger turned in on yourself. That's a very common one. Not all, with everything, there's a huge range and spectrum of all those levels. Some of them aren't necessarily at the childhood trauma. They can be affected by other things that are causing a noise in their head, that are causing their busy head. But I've also got lots of fiction.
I'm really excited to read it, but I've got Help trilogy coming up. You've got Tricky trilogy coming up.
finishing
And
with
all
that
your
trilogy.
children and stuff and your marketing things. I don't know how you even found time to talk to me today.
I've also have had a download, as I call it, because I have been gestating on another psych thriller, because I write Midweek Flash, which is my weekly writing challenge with a picture prompt, which I put up every Wednesday, and I created to keep me writing something every week. Although I've put it on, it's on holiday until September, which I actually haven't done for 2 years. But because I'm trying to get Tricky's third book down, I need to just have that focus. But it provides me with fodder for new stuff.
Yeah.
And so this psych thriller, I was wondering about it. Then I woke up one morning and the whole story just downloaded. So I wrote it out all in hand. And then I said, right, get back in the queue.
Yeah. If we started on the new thing every time it came through, we'd never finish anything.
And I've got an occult horror about the occult also.
Oh,
just your way in the back there. So, yeah.
Well, I'll have to have you back on again so you can talk more in depth about your fiction as well. Assuming that I can edit this all right and it all looks okay. Right, well, thank you ever so much for spending some time with me today.
Very much for focusing on my book.
You're so busy. I don't know how you found the time for it. Show us your book again so that all of my friends...
I don't manage my time very well. Otherwise, I think I'd produce a lot more. But it is producing things I think about. There it is.
But yeah, there's Kill the Goblins, and we will put it in the description. There'll be a universal link so that if you click it, it will go to your local Amazon store. And I will also link all of Miranda's social media. And
it is not... I'm trying to think. It is not exclusive Amazon. It is wide.
Okay.
I have got it everywhere. So it isn't just on Amazon for those people who like to boycott Amazon and who like to or have an e-reader that isn't Kindle.
Yeah. So I will put your self-help link tree and your fiction link tree because we've talked about that as well. Why not? And people will be able to find all the different places. I will also put your social media handles all over this video as well, probably, if I remember. But thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Okay. Bye.
Bye. So I really hope that you enjoyed listening to Miranda and I talk about her book, Kill the Goblins. I will put a universal link to it in the description so that when you click on it, it takes you to your local Amazon page so that you can get hold of that. And I'll also put down her link tree so that you can go through and see her self-help vlog or look up her more fictional sort of books if that's your sort of thing. So during next Monday, 6 a.m. UK time, I will be here doing what am I doing? Packing video because I'm going on holiday. I'm so excited. So you all have to get excited with me, even though I'm going to a caravan in Lowestoft, glitz and glam. If you can't wait that long to see me again, I understand, pretty awesome. I will be here every single morning in your shorts, taking a great big deep breath. Getting our days off to a good start. I love when you join me for those. I love even more when you tell me that you've joined me for those. So do come along, join in, comment, tell me what you're grateful for, what's making you happy. I will also be here, assuming that I remember, because I've forgotten a couple of times now, but I will be here on Terrarium Tuesday to check in with Dave the Terrarium, assuming that I haven't killed him yet. And if you're really, really lucky, I'll pop back in on a Wednesday for a Witchy Wednesday intuitive card reading as well. Until then, you have yourself a magical week.